don't need another clap.
What if you cut it off too much? and then you're
One
like,
clap.
I got to bring it back in the clap.
Do you not understand how editing works?
No, I do not. I assume there's a machine that does it. You're saying there's work involved.
No. So I was listening to a podcast, one of our old podcasts the other day, and it was a story that you were telling about when you and Lan started the digital media agency and some of the decisions that you made around how you were going to approach it to actually, because it was the main focus for you. And the story, I'm going to tell you your own story, then it was about how you had to sit and have a conversation, you and Lan sat and had a conversation with each other about where you sit in each other's priority list.
Oh, yep.
It really struck, like every time I've heard that story, it's an intense one to actually listen to. Actually, if I put myself in that situation and sitting down with my wife and going, hey, the business is the most important thing at the moment.
Yeah. So yeah, we back when we started the business when we were dating, but it was serious enough that we knew we sort of end up together. So it wasn't like we're, boyfriend girlfriend type thing, and then let's start a business and have a chat.
That's so strange hearing
I know, right?
a 40-year-old man go boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah, it's like it does sound strange, but one of the things when we started the company at the time was it was shifting our dynamic, because obviously being in a relationship together and then going into a working relationship as well as a personal relationship, there were pressures that were starting to creep in. You could just tell. It's not they weren't bad or anything like that, but they were different. It was definitely shifting because, as everyone could imagine, you don't get the break from I'm in a personal relationship. You're in a basically 24/7. You move into each other's lives, which is quite. I don't want to say intimidating, but it was quite intense for that period, particularly during the transition. Lana had been working for someone, I was working for myself. I was used to sort of running my own businesses. She was coming in for the first time into one of her own companies, and we're in a new relationship, and you pile all those things on. One of the things that we needed to work on was, we had sort of at-work personalities at the time and at-home personalities, because we're still going through this new love affair, so to speak. Plus, we've got professional relationships where we have to execute projects together, and there's the intensity of growing a company. And communication, we felt, was really important, that we didn't ruin the relationship by not transitioning, particularly the early periods of starting a company, which are always intense, but running a company is always intense. So we thought we had to work on that. And one of the things we did as part of that was, as you mentioned, sit down and have a frank conversation around priorities based on what we want to build in life. So we were talking about a future together. So what did that future look like? And in order to get to that future, what were the decisions that needed to be made now that we could both agree on? So when we made those decisions, it didn't create any friction, because it was, we both agree on it. We're sort of people that when you make a deal, the deal's the deal. And we particularly knew at that time that in order to get where we wanted to go and the ambition that we had, that there were probably going to be instances over the next couple of years where we would need to make decisions that were probably not aligned to our value set if we weren't in the early stages of growing a company. So,
how do you mean?
For instance, I think if we look at our family values, we're very much family first type business, a family first type value set. And that means that we'd prioritize time with family, quality time, birthdays, events, seeing family, prioritizing that. And she was very close to her family, I was very close to mine, and they were really important things. But during the periods of growing a business in the first couple of years, there were times where we would need to work weekends, we would need to do things, we would need to miss particular, potentially not as important events or what it was, but we gave ourselves the options to choose to work on the business as a priority for that couple of years, because we felt that if we had that level of focus and ability to say, I really need to spend that time doing this versus our highest value, we wouldn't be in conflict. And it wasn't a perfect science, but it was an ability to have clear communication on when those times arose, how we would deal with them. So we would also give each other the option, go, this is more important than I might perceive it. Say it was a birthday party or something like that. I really need to do work today, or I can't leave early, or you'll have to go by yourself, or whatever it is, and vice versa, versus still having the dialogue to be able to say, no, this one's more important at the moment. And so we could have that communication without feeling like it was always a battle, because we're on the same page. We just needed to communicate better, we thought, during that period. And for us, it worked. It also gave us probably a jump-off point for communication in the rest of the relationship. But in saying that, it definitely wasn't perfect. And it's important to understand that the concept sounds great, but we're still emotional beings. So even things that we got so intense in our business in those early stages, we had to institutionalize a date night. And then the first thing we did is institutionalizing a date night, which was midweek, just to try and break up the week. We were working pretty intense hours, sort of 7 days a week. We had to have a rule of no business talk, and that literally lasted one date night because we had nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's not that we don't have things going on, but there was an intensity there that was our world. And frankly, we enjoyed talking about the business. That was actually our excitement, our enjoyment, and part of building our life. So we changed that. It was just, we never spoke outside work around operations. And the reason for it is operations generally around problems and solving things and fixing operational things. We were talking more in our times when we went to talk about business outside what we'd call not working hours, but in different situations. It was about vision, entrepreneurial things that made us excited about what we were building, not trying to fix an email system that would have gone down or a client challenge or something like that. So we were just trying to be more thoughtful in the way we communicate with our partner. One of my big things was, for me to relax or go to sleep at night, I verbalize things. So saying to something like Elana, geez, we haven't checked cash flows at 9:30 at night and we're sleeping there, that sets her off and go, why are you bringing that up? I'm drifting off to sleep, and vice versa. She'd say something like, there's nothing I can do about it now. And so understanding from a communication point of view how to manage that. Yeah. And most people, or the people we'd spoken to when we were sort of gathering information around like how have you dealt with this as a couple, as a family business and all that, communication is generally quite poor when people are in stressful situations like growing companies, that they never actually take the time to work out their communication strategy.
And you guys, I know you took you really focused on that because I saw the shift because we were in the same office at that time, from when you started really going, no, there has to be a different communication style in the office and externally.
Yeah.
I saw there was a real line in the sand that happened at that time. How difficult was that to actually maintain? Because making the decision's easy, but maintaining it long term, particularly because you guys just didn't work in the same business. You were leading the business together. Yeah. So my parents worked in the same business, completely different places. So they had context, but they didn't have the daily in the pocket.
100%. And it's unrelenting. So at home, you don't leave work. It's 24/7, the whole thing. So for us, it was not a difficult time. It required a lot of discipline. That was probably the most difficult part, is the discipline of it when you're tired and all that, trying to keep to the standards that we're setting for that period. But they were vital because, frankly, the relationship depended on it, because you can damage and fracture relationships regardless of what it is. Yeah. The worst thing that I think can happen is not only do you navigate it well, but you've actually diluted it so much that it's lost the actual spark that makes it fun anyway. And I think a lot of people, when they're growing companies, they can still work together, but they've actually lost the spark between them. And to me, was probably the most stressful part, because I'm sure, and I would never speak for Elana in that, but I'm sure there was, if not 90% of the day, she'd want to kill me. Now, leaving,
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, well, and frankly, she'd be right. But to then switch from 90% of the time I want to kill this person to, I shouldn't say that, it's probably pretty poor public, but really, think of your colleague or your boss or who you're working with and people that annoy you enough. How do you switch back into being caring, loving, totally into a relationship? Like, to actually make those switches is very difficult. It's not just an intimate relationship. it's also if you have a business partner who's a friend, and these are conversations that I think are essential if you've got a partner in business in any way, because it's inevitable, the problem that'll occur, but the worst part is the thing that doesn't surface and it turns into disdain, annoyance, and you're harboring resentment to a partnership that you've not had the courage to bring up and go, what is our communication strategy? So for me, the biggest fear of all of it was diluting the relationship to a point that it became tolerable, not exciting and fun and still that. And so in reflection to what you're saying and listening to that back there, the mechanics of how we work and communicate were probably the easiest part of it. The difficulty was, but is it really false? And actually what we're doing is diluting a relationship that will eventually peter out and die because of the stress we've had in the relationship. So for me, I spent far more time worried about that than the actual energy of how we get a communication strategy and the rules around it.
Yeah. You've taken a fair while to kind of talk through that process in this one. I've heard you tell this story in an abbreviated form to people that you've been working with, consulting and whatnot. And one of the key phrases that it's always stuck out of my head because it's such an impactful thing was that the way you phrased it before in the really shortened version is that you sat down with Elana and had a conversation, and both you had a conversation where you went, you are not my number one priority at the moment.
Yeah. And I want to get that wording clear because I think it's vitally important. We sat down.
Yeah.
I did not sit down with her, and it's not a woke thing. It is, we were both invested in the relationships at the number one priority. We've at that, this is the person I want to be with. That's the most important thing. I would destroy the business if I had to make a choice between the two. So we both had that feeling, and I certainly felt that from Elana's point of view. So we loved what we were building, but it was never at the cost of the relationship. Not everyone makes that decision, and each to their own.
Yeah, but when I've seen...
But yes,
sorry,
to your point, we did make that you are not the highest priority, but not in the terms of, and this is probably the caveat on terms of emotionally and support personally, we were always there. In decisions around our time, where our energy is being spent, or how we needed to, if I had to stay up all night for something, it wasn't, hey, we've got breakfast the next morning and you got to be there. It was like, that was the priority. There's no resentment there. So to have that freedom and flexibility to make decisions that aligned with our goal, that's what I mean by the pressure of you're not the number one priority. But we were never neglecting the other person. In fact, I think making that decision is actually more invested in the relationship being the number one priority.
100%. And I know that the little caveats around it, that whenever that you had a rule that whenever Elana called, you would pick up.
Yeah, I've got one phone. It's one, the rudest, I guess, founder, CEO. It was, my phone's always on in a meeting for one call I'll take.
Yep.
And that was the promise I made 12 years ago. If you ever needed me, you will 100% be able to get onto me.
Yeah. And that's a nuance. So the thing that when I've heard you tell this story to other people, you say it from a position of authority.
Yeah.
People that you're working with trying to emulate that and take that on, people overplay with that toy at first. How have you seen that play out in a misinterpretation way?
Yeah, I hope the misinterpretation hasn't been from listening to that podcast and cost anyone. But I think with any when you hear things like how people have operated, that worked for us.
Yep.
And for us, and then at times it didn't, because we shifted into a new gear of business and we need to reevaluate what it is. We had a child a few years ago now, and that shifted everything.
So I would ask, would you, the decision that you made and that sort of going all in at that conversation there, now with the different family life that you have and the different responsibilities you have, would you make that same decision again?
It's a great question. I haven't thought about it. And when you say that, my first thought is I wouldn't, and then I realised I was on the phone doing deals 12 hours after Leo was born.
Yeah.
Not a way of not being their support. Obviously, baby sleep, you duck out and you speak.
Yeah.
Like, God,
We know how babies
I'm trying
work.
not to project myself as a complete utter tool. But we still, I think, in our maybe we look at it as an expanded family dynamic. The highest priority is shifted now to the three of us and how we look after each other in the dynamic, and care and investment in that is the number one priority. The things that support that are still our commercial ventures and things we're doing, and also projects we love doing, like even the investment and building Backable is a significant risk for us, and for building any new venture, but particularly this one, because as people know listening to this, we felt this was important to build, not just a good commercial venture. Like, this is required in the world. So this has got a couple of layers of maybe emotional problems with it. But yes, I think for us, and to what you were saying before, people take the bits they want or hear versus what they should be thinking. And I think this happens in consulting and coaching too, and great stories you hear about amazing business owners on social. You get the highlight reel and then try and base your personal strategy on a nuance you've heard. It's just it's the whipped cream on top of ice cream. There's no substance to it. So you must delve into, what are we really saying here? And if I was listening to this as an independent person and I was thinking, wow, I'm in a relationship that needs probably this, or a partnership, what do I need to do? It's, what is our communication strategy, and are we aligned in values? So I've got interests in other companies with other partners that are deeply close to me. I consider them family, like as you know, Nigel and other people. It's like, it is 100% personal. And so the communication strategy and the values alignment has to be clear with all those people too. Equally, they need to understand my clarity on where my priorities sit for reasoning. Without that, you're not doing your job as a partner in any venture, let alone your company. So for me, listening to this is, don't take this as I now need to go and tell my wife you're not a priority, because that was never our value set. The value set was, because you're a priority and our life's a priority, this is the behaviors we may need to shift here because we needed time, resource, and things happening. It was a priority. So instead of saving for a house, for instance, back in those times, we were investing back in the business. So every one of those decisions had to come back to, we decided together, because if every time something different came up, we had to debate it at full, it's exhausting. And then you stop bringing innovation and ideas, and because it's just, you sit there and go, but it's not worth it. And then you get into one of those, muted relationships that you then, to me, the warriors harbor resentment because you can't operate how you need to or want to get the result. And so I think it's a very deep thinking, but for someone watching, you need to work out what it is for you, and you have to also be clear on what your priorities are.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, you can't really place them on anyone else.
So it's funny because the words that were said from you and Lance were, you are not my highest priority at this time, but it's actually the reverse of that. You go, you are my highest priority. This is the vehicle to deliver the things that we said we wanted together at the time. Yeah,
it is true. Because I think now that they've shifted slightly, albeit I'm not sure if they really have, because we're still totally invested in building our companies. We've just found the balance that works for us. I know my behavior would be different in terms of if I had more time to invest in the relationships and things I'd like to do. I'd love to do new experience things with Elana and Leo all the time, like just simple things that we don't right now have that time for, because it's not the appropriate time to do that. But if it was, I didn't have to come into work, the things that we'd be doing would be significantly different. That's how I'd invest in the experiences of our family, right? But at the moment, that's not where we're at. Living somewhere else, for instance, doing stuff like that, it's just not where we're at.
So this has been a sort of an ongoing thing for you, like that thing of when you're in something, you're in it. And Lance is very much the same. She's the only person I would say, exactly. She eggs you on in 100%. Those.
No, she drives, like her focus on things is extraordinary.
So for both of you can be hyper focused on those areas. how do you, or do you know when you've gone too far? Is it a self-realization, or did you have to be told, or vice versa in those? So I guess the question would be, when does sort of going all in move over to recklessness?
Well, we're probably bringing up a subject towards what's balance, and what are the triggers. I'm trying to think of a trigger where we've gone too far, and I think for me probably where some of these things have maybe got close to being maybe too obsessive, and maybe in a point of too obsessive and getting no production out of it.
Okay, yeah.
And so the difference is when you're starting to do things like working for work's sake but actually having no result, or you're actually not doing what you're supposed to do, you're hiding in something that's actually not doing something, so not achieving the result you need to. So it's pulling back on things that are a waste of time, because the time is so limited, and you are sacrificing something you'd love to do versus something you've got to do now. In saying that, psychologically or from a philosophy point of view, maybe it's not any different. Maybe it's words over how you'd behave anyway. But making sure that my partner or family dynamic feels happy is an indicator of how we're going, and not from a superficial of they're happy because there's money and you doing things. Happiness of, are they achieving fulfillment at this period of our lives? What is fulfillment there? And that has been a balance we need to always look at, because the sacrifice of one thing generally has someone else doing some heavy lifting. So times where I needed to be doing something, Lana's been doing heavy lifting on other things, and vice versa. And particularly with a kid, those dynamics shift massively, even from sleep point of view of when I need sleep, and just because I'm at the moment championing something versus that. It's just, there's a lot of complexity that like any family and relationship has, but it's understanding where, for me, it's still back to that, does this feel right? But also, are we checking in?
Yeah.
And are we checking in that this is right? And do we have communication? Because this is the key to a good business, but I think with a relationship.
Yeah, we're kind of jumping between business and relationship here. I mean, do you think it's because you and Lance have been in the businesses together for so long? Is it an advantage that she understands that? Because my dynamic is very different. My wife's business is completely separate to mine. There was a long period where she couldn't actually tell what my role was in here. But having this kind of conversation with somebody that's external to the business experience, do you reckon that's a harder thing or an easier thing?
I don't know, because I can't relate to it. I can relate to probably if I had more time and energy to look at holistically. I think my core family dynamic's good. I think I've fractured friendships, not in a unsolvable way, but I would want to be far more invested in friendships that literally don't have the energy and time, not because they're not brilliant people or that I hold them at highest value, but there are things when you've only got so much energy that it just are exhausting.
It just reminded me of Elana's statement about you. Great bloke, shit friend.
Yeah. I absolutely. And I hope my friends understand I'm probably there better when there's a real problem, but the great things in between is the catch-ups, the chats, my hyper-focus actually tends to forget the nuance of feeding. You need to feed and check in and do that, whereas it's probably something I would address differently if I understood that. But as I was saying before, how our dynamics work during these periods, but these periods now have been running 20 years.
Yeah.
And so you start to think about where is the balance, and it's not even a balance, it's where is it important for priorities, because then your friendships actually start to become far more important, I think, as you get older. They go in waves of things with importance, and you get deep fulfillment from them as well as your family life. So it's always an interesting dynamic, but the core of that is communication and understanding how to and where to put your priorities and what that feels and looks like.
Yeah. I think it's and I know we don't like to button hook these kind of things, but there's something, because we've seen it happen to a number of people. You said something earlier about people hearing what they want to hear from what you said. So, and going like, have that conversation of you are not my highest priority, because that aligns with the thing I already think is right. What warning would you give someone about listening to what you've said?
Well, go back to your question before. How do you deal with it if it's you're in a different business in your example? I see you're in a business here, but your business is your family. So how are you running that business, and how are you both as co-CEOs of your family? How do you manage that business, the business of home? And so some people look at it as, well, the family just needs to be the thing behind, versus, well, this is just all your one life. Yep. This happens to be a section of it that needs to deliver a result, or it's a department of the family. Our business isn't our business. Our family is our business. We happen to have things that are projects that make money. At the end of the day, you don't sell your family off, you sell your business off. So where is actually your focus really? And do I think people misinterpret that the most important thing is not their company. The most important thing is why they're building the company, for what purpose. And if you don't have that purpose, you're going to find hollowness in the whole journey. It doesn't matter what your exit is. So what? Do more of it. Well, great. And that's not against people who love building businesses, but I have a lot more fulfillment, everything outside the business, because at the end of the day, after you sell a business, now what?
Yeah, I think it's something that a lot of the business owners I've talked to, everyone says, virtually everyone goes, family is my biggest value, those kind of things. But I think they lose sight of it because of business pressures, all of those kind. And it's a repeated pattern that I've noticed anyway. Or maybe I'm just seeing myself in things.
Well, potentially, but but I see it slightly differently. I think a lot of things are said by a lot of people. So you're only loyal when your loyalty's tested. Family's only the priority when you have to make a decision around priority. Yeah. So I see a lot of people who are completely conflicted in what they think their priority is and what their actions are. So for me, and when we see this a lot with CEOs that have built companies, and they get there and they're just essentially lost in their office because the business is running, but they're in complete conflict of actually their values and don't know the way back. So even the winning in a company sense is not translating into them feeling better. And so I think with a lot of this, when people say, my biggest priority is this, and every action they take is not aligned to that priority. So that's probably where you can delude yourself. So for us, telling each other the relationship's not the highest priority is probably not a fair description of it. The relationship is the highest priority. This project gets us to where we want to be in the relationship in a couple of years' time. We see that as the time we need to take for this type of intensity. So we're actually making decisions towards that highest priority. That's just a decision, where others read that as the business is so important, you've got to build it, then you worry about the next bit when you've got time and money. It's like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, the lack of context or the
nuance
nuance of it.
You can't double back that way if you've sold out those values for that period. So we never sold the relationship out. Yeah. And I think that's probably the difference in my mind, is it's aligned, even though decisions were, we would love to be doing this, but we feel we need to do this and we're in agreement. It's that agreement on what decisions need to be made in those moments during those periods of intensity.
Yeah. I think the nuance and actually understanding what that very simple line means is the difference between destroying a relationship to build a business.
Yeah, I think the destroying, honestly, I think the bigger problem is honestly the dilution of a relationship, because you can still get through it and then sit there and like the magic was killed.
Yeah.
So did you lose the relationship? And you know, we see it all the time. We've seen it with business owners that have finally kicked into a gear and it's doing everything they want, and they go back and they want to spend more time in their business because they've lost all fulfillment and connection to their family. And if that's the case, then you need to change gears right now and work out, right, how do I get that back? Because if it's important to you, you find a way, the same way you'd find a way to grow your company.
Beautiful, mate. Thank you very much for the conversation. Didn't go anywhere near where I was thinking it was going to, but really enjoyed it.